Hello everyone, and welcome to Anatomy 4, lecture number 7. After today's lecture, you should be able to do quiz number 4, and this is the last lecture of new content that will be on exam number 2. First, we're going to be talking about the digestive system. The digestive system is, as you know, for processing food. It includes everything from the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, some glands like the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas that secrete some enzymes to break down our food, and then we've got our intestines, and finally, poo. So let's start in the beginning. When you eat food, it obviously goes in your mouth first. Your teeth grind up the food. The saliva in your mouth is actually there not only for lubrication, but also to start digestion. There is an enzyme in your saliva called amylase. This is the first enzyme that your food hits, and it breaks down starch. For those of you who still use envelopes that you have to lick, the reason why it tastes yucky and then tastes sweet is because the amylase in your saliva is breaking down the starches in the glue and turning them into sugar. Oh, my GIF is working. Oh, that's cute. It didn't work when I lectured this last year, so I'm happy. So this is swallowing. Once you swallow, the food goes down the pharynx. The epiglottis flops over the larynx or the voice box. This keeps the food from going the right way, makes it go down the esophagus, which is this tube here, instead of down the lungs. When you say something going down the wrong pipe and you start coughing, what happened was you got some food in there before the epiglottis closed all the way, so a little food got in the lungs. So after the food passes goes over the epiglottis, it enters this muscular tube called the esophagus. What this GIF is showing is something called peristalsis. It's a wave of muscle contraction that pushes food towards the stomach. I don't know if you've ever really thought about how the food gets from your mouth to the stomach, but I always kind of thought gravity had something to do with it. But if that was the case, how would astronauts be able to eat? And how would you be able to eat if you're hanging upside down? It's this wave of muscle contractions that moves the food down into your stomach. Once you get to the stomach, there's a little sphincter right here. It's a little muscle, a ring of muscles, kind of like what you can see on your anus. This sphincter here lets the food into the stomach and then shuts the stomach off so that the gastric juices, the acids and stuff in the stomach can't get back out. If you have a problem with this sphincter, you can have a disease known as gastric reflux. The stomach is coated with a thick layer of mucus to protect itself, and then it's got a very acidic mixture on the inside. This acid is there for a reason. It breaks down your food with chemical reactions, and it also kills most of the bacteria that you eat in the food. So, we're eating bacteria all the time. It usually doesn't hurt us, but every once in a while we'll get something that's super tough that isn't killed by cooking our food, and it's not killed by our stomach acid. One kind of bacteria can actually live inside the stomach, and it's called Helicobacter pylori. This is actually the bacterium that causes ulcers. Now we're on to the small intestine. That's where the food goes after the stomach. This is where partially digested food mixes with juices from the pancreas and bile from the gallbladder. The bile is used to digest fats, and the pancreatic juices, if you remember from last time, help digest the sugars. The small intestine is where the nutrients are absorbed. And if you look at this cross-section through the small intestine, look at all of these folds here. Those folds make the most surface area possible, so the highest amount of nutrients possible can be absorbed. And the small intestine does one better. So these big folds that we see here are called villi, and each of these folds has a bunch of little teeny tiny folds on top of it called microvilli. So there's folds on folds on folds. It's as much surface area as possible. After the food goes through your small intestine, it goes through the large intestine. At this point, all of the nutrients that you're going to use have been digested. The large intestine is where water is removed. So any extra water that's in your food or water that you drink gets absorbed by the large intestine. The food moves slowly through here. It's got a nice moderate pH. There are a few bacteria, well, quite a few bacteria in here that help digest a few more things out of the food and help you make vitamin B12 and vitamin K. You can see this little blind-ended tube here is your appendix. This is right at the top of the large intestine where the small intestine joins. They think that this had a role at some point in early human evolution, but right now it's just a little extra thing. And this is where food can get stuck in here and the appendix can get inflamed and rupture. That's appendicitis. That actually happened to me. I thought I had pulled a muscle while vomiting, and I waited 4 days before going to the hospital, wound up spending 20 days in beautiful Bay Area hospital, got to know all the nurses, had 3 surgeries, and I'm lucky that I made it out of there alive. So anyway, the end result of all of these processes is feces, and you usually, if you're a healthy adult, have a bowel movement once per day. However, this can vary depending on how much you ate and how much of that was fiber. And if you think about it, if you have diarrhea, your body is actually kind of shutting down the large intestine. It's making it not absorb the water so that the poo comes out, the feces come out all watery. On to the excretory system. The excretory system deals with getting rid of bodily fluids. So, the human body contains about 43 liters of fluid. That's about 22.5 Coke bottles. That's a lot of fluid. Most of that fluid is intracellular fluid, so it's the fluid in between inside your cells. And then about 15 liters, about maybe a third or so, is extracellular fluid. This is the stuff that's around your cells. And of this extracellular fluid, some of it's interstitial fluid, some is plasma, and some's like your lymph and your mucus and other things. So in your cells, ammonia builds up as a byproduct of cellular processes. In mammals, this ammonia is converted to urea, and it takes a lot of water to create the urea. So when the urea is being made, you end up with a lot of water being used here, and the kidneys work to remove the ammonia, remove the urea, and get the other waste out of the blood, and to let just the right amount of water leave the body. So here's a brief overview of your excretory system. You have one pair of kidneys. The kidneys are actually pretty high up along your back, pretty higher up than most people think. They're connected with little tubes down to your bladder, and then it goes from there. The urine is made in the nephrons of the kidney. This here is a kidney. The nephrons are a series of tubes that span the renal cortex and the renal medulla. So they're these little tubes in here. The urine is collected in this area called the renal pelvis, and then it travels down here the ureter to the bladder for storage. So here's a little overview of how the nephrons work. Now I think this is really neat. Here's where, this is the tube. It's a big long thing. There's a little sac-like thing here. This is called the Bowman's capsule, and inside it there's something called a glomerulus, and we're going to get to that in a second. And this is where the urine formation starts, and then the urine has to go through this tube, woo, until it finally gets all the way processed and goes into the collecting ducts. And you can see that these fun tubes are covered with arteries and veins. There's a lot of blood vessels here. The glomerulus, which is what we saw in the little Bowman's capsule, this little cherry here, This is actually a capillary bed. So the blood gets pumped in here and it slows down in this thing. It's like hitting it at high speed. So what happens here is the blood pressure forces about 20% of the fluid out of the blood and into the nephron. So urine actually starts out as plasma. This plasma is a lot of water and it has some cellular waste in it. In the tubes, in the next part that we saw, 99% of the water gets reabsorbed into the body and reused. Only 1% of the water gets lost as urine. So this shows you what happens in the tubes. So this is kind of looking at the inside of the tube, the wall of the tube, and outside of the tube. And then here's the blood vessel that's running along by that. So the urine is going through here for processing. The salts like sodium and chloride are leaving the tubule through these little things in the walls, and they're going back into the blood. Water is also getting forced out and going into the blood. There are these little things here. These are the transport proteins. These actively pump ions and urea into the tubules. So these actively not only are these forcing the things back out of the urine, but they're also forcing things from the blood into the urine. So it's a two-way exchange. So as you go down this big long fun loop in your kidney, the water leaves the urine, and when you get to the bottom here, the water is its saltiest, and as you come up here on the ascending loop, the loop going up, the useful salts actively are pumped out of the tubule. So water leaves first and then the salts leave. So that's how a healthy kidney works. A healthy kidney, takes the bad stuff from your blood, keeps the stuff that you need, puts stuff that you need back in the blood, and it makes the urine to get rid of your cellular wastes. Most kidney ailments, like this pretty bad one here, those are actually kidneys. Most kidney ailments are complications of things like diabetes or high blood pressure, but you can also have a genetic predisposition for kidney disease. Or you can mess up your kidneys by filtering a lot of bad stuff. So things like if you have to filter a lot of lead, if you poison with arsenic, pesticides, or you take an awful lot of drugs, it can mess up your kidneys. If your kidneys get messed up, you have to go on dialysis. Now, dialysis machines like this one, this gentleman's hooked up for it, his blood is actually leaving his body, going through this machine, and then going back into his body. The dialysis machine artificially filters the blood. This can take several hours, up to 3 times a week, and the only other option is getting a liver transplant. Now, this is a pretty serious, or getting a kidney transplant, sorry. Whoa, lost my place there. Kidneys, yay. Okay, every day in the world, 17 people die waiting for a kidney transplant. So this is a pretty serious thing. However, you can be a living donor of a kidney. You have 2, you can get rid of 1, and you still have a backup. And most people do fine with just 1 kidney. Okay, the last thing is we're going to talk about the reproductive system and then go a little bit into human development, and that'll end up our anatomy unit. So this is how a man is plumbed. You can see the penis here. Both the urinary tract and the reproductive tract empty through the penis, as you probably know. And here we've got I believe this is the prostate. Yes, here's the prostate, and then here are the seminal vesicles. These are the things that make the semen. So there's semen and then there's sperm. Sperm are the important part. These are what carry the genetic information to the egg. These cells here are diploid. These are the cells that give rise to all the sperm in a male. They undergo mitosis, so they divide. And then they undergo meiosis, so they half their number of chromosomes. And that's when they start growing the tails, and they look like the sperm. So these are immature sperm that are being produced. Mature sperm, as we said, are haploids. They have half the number of chromosomes that a normal body cell does. They have a long flagellum, and then this piece here is a bunch of mitochondria. Why do they need the mitochondria? If you think about it, the mitochondria are like the powerhouse of the cell. They're what make energy. So the mitochondria are so the sperm can swim. The sperm is wearing a little hat here. This is a cap, and it contains enzymes for dissolving the outer layer of the egg. It takes 100 days for the male body to make a mature sperm. However, males are constantly producing sperm, and they have millions of them in different stages of maturation. The sperm leave the male body in a whitish fluid called semen. 5% of semen are the sperm. The rest of it, the 95%, are secretions from other glands, like the prostate. Semen is rich in fructose. Fructose is sperm food. It's a sugar that helps them, is what they need to move. And the semen actually raises the pH of the human reproductive tract. It makes it more habitable for the sperm. The urethra here passes through the prostate gland. So there's the bladder, urethra goes through the prostate, and then out to the penis. Now this is the gland that makes a lot of the semen. When this gets enlarged, you can have a hard time urinating, and you can't make enough semen to have sexual intercourse. This is why once you get to around 40 or 50, you start having to have prostate exams as depicted in this picture. On to the female reproductive tract. The female reproductive tract is internal instead of external. Our eggs are made in the ovary. And you can see we have separate holes. We have one hole for the urine, one hole for reproduction, and one hole for our poo. I think that's the cleaner way of doing it. Females are only fertile at certain times of the month, and we'll talk about why right here. So this is inside the ovary. You start out with a follicle. The follicle divides, and the cell in here undergoes meiosis and forms the egg. Then the follicle will rupture. This is ovulation right here. Here's a picture of it actually happening. After the egg leaves, the follicle stays behind and forms this thing called the corpus luteum. This secretes progesterone. This keeps your body from ovulating again after you have an egg in your female reproductive tract. This way, you only get pregnant once. You don't end up like a cat having litters with kittens with multiple ages. If no pregnancy occurs, the corpus luteum breaks down. If pregnancy occurs, it keeps going, and it keeps inhibiting ovulation, so the baby has a chance to develop. Here are some pictures showing you the monthly cycle. As the follicle matures, when ovulation comes, there's a spike in follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These are two hormones in the blood. And it's what the hormones spike, and that's what triggers the ovulation. And this is the ovulation occurs right here. This is the time of the month when the uterine lining is the thickest. It's ready to accept a baby. This is the lining of the uterus in the female. So after your period or menstruation, it builds up and builds up and builds up. Here's where ovulation occurs. So if an egg was fertilized, it would be coming down right in here and embedding in the uterine layer. If pregnancy does not occur, then of course the uterine lining falls off and you get your menstrual flow. If fertilization occurs, it usually happens up here in the oviducts. It doesn't happen right in the uterus. So the egg is here. Only one sperm will actually enter the egg and donate its DNA. After the sperm fuses with the egg, the sperm's nucleus will kind of keep going into the egg, and it will eventually fuse with the nucleus of the egg. As you can see here, Here's the egg and sperm nuclei. They're going to fuse and baby will start coming. So how do you, now that you know how pregnancy can happen and a little bit about how the female body works, how do you prevent it from happening? Well, here are some descriptions of some methods, and here are the effectiveness of the methods. If you have you consistently have sex and you don't use any reproductive method, there's a 10% chance that you will not have a baby. There's a 90% chance that you will have a baby. Now this chance varies with the health of the female, the fertility of the male. There's a lot of different variables. But anyway, chance is no way to prevent a pregnancy. The only one that's 100% effective is abstinence. Unfortunately, that's not a very popular option, especially at SWAC's campus. Not really sure why. Coming in second at 99.6% success of preventing pregnancy is tubal ligation or vasectomy. Yes, it does occasionally not work. Then in the other highly effective are hormonal implants like IUDs that have hormones in them. Wait, no, that's in the next one. That's 98% effective. These are hormonal implants that like go in your upper arm, slowly release hormones. IUDs are highly effective. The Depo-Provera injection is very effective. However, this can decrease your fertility once you're off of it. Just an IUD or a condom is 95% effective, so you have a 5% chance of getting pregnant when you have intercourse with that. If you take the pill or use the birth control patch and you do it correctly, you take the pill at the same time each day, you have a 94% chance of preventing pregnancy. So you still have a 6% chance of getting pregnant. Other effective things are things like spermicides, the sponge, the thermal rhythm method where you have to take your vaginal temperature before you have intercourse, diaphragms, condoms without lubrication. Moderately effective things, spermicidal cream, the rhythm method. It's another one where you have to take your temperature daily. Withdrawal, these are things that 25% of the time result in babies. Also, very cheap condoms are only about 70% effective. So don't get your condom out of the vending machine. Go to some place like the Waterfall Clinic and get a good one. Okay. So after sperm meets egg, you're on their way to baby. But sometimes things can happen where pregnancy is terminated, and that's called an abortion. There are two types of abortion, natural ones, also known as miscarriages, or artificial. 10% of all detected pregnancies end in spontaneous abortion. There's something wrong with the embryo, it can't come to term, it goes away. 50% of all pregnancies are cut short by a genetic problem. So half the time you get pregnant and the baby is spontaneously aborted. Most of these spontaneous abortions happen within days of fertilization, so you have no idea that you were pregnant and you'll never know. Half of all unplanned pregnancies end in medical abortion. In the first 9 weeks, this can happen by a pill. The pill is called mifepristone, I think it's called. RU486 is its scientific name. Up to 14 weeks, they can come in with a suction device and remove the embryo. After that, it gets more complicated. I don't want to sermonize you, but I do highly recommend prevention before abortion. Okay, so now you have an embryo, you have a sperm and an egg. What happens next? Well, human development happens. You go from the egg up to the organism. And we've studied this a lot in other species. Early development of is very similar and closely related species. So a lot of the work on early human development that happens inside mom, we've done in other species. Like the first few days of sea urchin development and human development are identical. So first you have the zygote, which is when the sperm meets the egg. Then you get the blastula. This is the blastula. It's just a hollow ball of cells. And at this stage, the blastula will move down the oviduct towards the womb or uterus. A little while later, these cells begin migrating, and there's this little inpouching here at the bottom of at one end of the embryo. This separates the embryo into 3 layers of tissue: the outside, the inside, and the middle. And it helps with the development occur. So we've gone zygote, blastula, gastrula. Now we're to the embryo. In early embryos, things that are about 2 to 4 cells, so this is even before the blastula stage, the cells can be separated to form identical siblings. So if you have identical twins, they were once one cell. After the first cell division, the 2 cells separated and they became separate individuals. As development continues, the cells differentiate. That means instead of having one cell originally that can give rise to anything in the body, the cells start to become a cell that will be part of the lung, or a cell that will be part of the kidney. During this process, there are master genes, also called homeotic genes. We talked about a few last term. They control the turning on and off of many other genes and orchestrate the formation of the embryo. So here's a little review of early development. First couple days, you've got a very small embryo. After 3 days, you have 4 cells. Day 96, day 4, you've got a little ball of cells. You've got a blastula by day 5. And then around days 6 to 7 is where you're starting to get gastrulation, and this is where the embryo actually makes its way down the oviduct and implants in the uterus. Oh, I had something else to say there, didn't I? So once this blastula is implanted in the uterus, just as it starts to gastrulate, it secretes a hormone called the human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. This is the hormone that's detected by pregnancy tests. So if you're peeing on a stick, it's to see if you have a blastula inside you that's making this hormone. And the purpose of this hormone is to prevent menstruation, so that you do not menstruate and thus lose the embryo. So now development continues. At day 15, you get what's called a primitive streak here. This starts gastrulation. So at day 15, you've got the little impouching. Days 18 through 23, this is what you look like. You're starting to have a fold where your backbone's going to be. Up here's where your head will be. By day 24 to 25, you look like this. This is actually very similar to what a chick embryo looks like at this age. Then by week 4, you start to have a head end and a tail end. Weeks 5 through 6, you develop an eye. Now you can start to see the human here. I've got little paddles for limbs. Now we're up to week 8. It's starting to look like a baby. By week 16, it's really looking like a baby. So what's mom's role in all this? Well, mom and baby are connected by an organ called the placenta. The placenta is actually where the fetus's blood vessels, so here are their blood vessels. This goes through the umbilical cord, and these blood vessels interface with mom's blood vessels. So mom's blood is actually flowing here, and it exchanges oxygen and it exchanges food and waste and that sort of thing with the baby. So the blood supplies don't meet, but they are exchanging good and bad stuff. So mom's giving them food and oxygen, they're giving mom extra wastes and carbon dioxide. That's why in the later stages of pregnancy, your 3rd trimester, you're going pee all the time because you're peeing for 2. So this shows the weeks are up here. This shows as development goes on. Pretty much for the first 2 weeks while the embryo isn't attached, Mom can do whatever she wants. It's not going to affect baby in the least. Once you get to week 3 though, and this is when, you may not even know you're pregnant yet, things like your nervous system start to form, your heart starts to form. By week 4, the upper limbs, the eyes, the lower limbs, and the ears are forming. You get into week 7, and now you're getting things like the teeth, the palate, the genitals. So this is why, if you're trying to have a baby, they recommend that you start taking the prenatal vitamins before you even know you're pregnant, so that in this critical period here where the baby has already started developing, you're getting it the nutrients it needs. So let's go over the stages of human development. The zygote comes first, the fertilized egg. Then we have the blastula. The blastula undergoes gastrulation and you get your embryo. Then the fetus, and then they're born, newborn, infant, child, and so on. So this shows the stages of human development, and it explains, how long they are and what you look like, basically during the period. So now the next thing that happens is obviously birth. Babies born before 37 weeks of gestation are considered to be premature. Their organs are not fully formed yet. Babies born before 22 weeks usually die because their lungs aren't formed. Half of the babies born between weeks 26 and weeks 22 have a permanent disability. Now, your development does not stop after you're born. Development isn't complete until the brain finishes forming at 22 years old. So some of you who are listening to my lecture are actually still developing. This is actually why the legal drinking age in the United States is 21. It's because by that, your brain doesn't finish developing until 21 or 22 years of age, so they don't want you, damaging your brain before it's finished forming.